Uh, Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of Sit Down for Stand Up. I have with me, well, needs no introduction, does he? Spiky Mike, who runs Funhouse Comedy. How's it going, Mike? You good?
I'm good, thanks, Daniel.
Awesome stuff. So, yeah, reason why I wanted you on because I get a lot of comedians on and sort of talk to them about how they got into comedy, why they got into comedy. I've had a couple of promoters on, so I thought, sod it, let's just go for one of the biggest promoters I know, and I'm now here talking to you. So, it's your story. I want to sort of know how and why did you transition from doing comedy, which I know you're an absolute great MC, you're a great comparer. All I've heard is positive things. How did you go to start running your own night and then expand it into the multiple venues you've got now?
Well, I started doing comedy around about 2000. At the first gig I did was at Just the Tonic. I used to go to Just the Tonic in the 90s in Nottingham religiously, like just about every single week for the whole decade, really. And then they did a new act night, and I just thought, oh, I'll give it a go. And it kind of went all right, but it was only a small crowd, and I didn't get that many laughs. And I thought, I'm not going to do it again until I've got better material. So I did it again, and a year later, they did another new act night, and it went loads better. And I thought, oh, I'm a natural. I'm absolutely brilliant at this. What I didn't realize really at the time was that the MC was a brilliant MC, and he really pumped the audience up to give me really back me. And so I absolutely smashed it in my head. But well, I smashed it in that the audience had really backed me. But I was so buzzing off that. Then I was like, all right, I'm chasing every open spot I can. But at that period, there were way fewer clubs than there are now. And in order to gig once a week, you had to literally travel the country because Nottingham had one club, Sheffield had one club, Manchester had, about three. So just to get one open spot a week, you had to travel sort of everywhere. And the perceived wisdom at the time was in order to get more stage time and improve, the best thing to do was to set up your own club. And then you get a monthly gig and more stage time from comparing than just doing 5 or 10 minutes. So I set up a gig at the upstairs room at the Charlotte in Leicester, which was a
Cool.
famous live music venue where Oasis and Radiohead and loads of acts played there before they were famous. And we had a little dingy room upstairs which held about 30 people. But we had a few people that have gone on to do pretty well. Henning Vane did an open spot up there, and I'm trying to think who else. Quite a few others who are doing pretty well now. Andrew O'Neill did there, and Dave Longley, and
Cool.
so that was our first ever club. And then I got approached by another pub in Derby, the Blessington Carriage, to do a night there. And that one, the Charlotte closed down after a couple of years, but the Derby Blessington is still running now. So we've been there for sort of 22, 23 years now.
Oh, that's a long old stint. So, aside from one, then to two, yeah, how many are we on now? Sort of 5, 10, 15?
45 at the moment.
Fucking hell.
It was
45.
50 earlier on this year, but you always get some that come and go. And spring was actually a pretty tough period for a lot of promoters.
Mm.
The warm, sunny weather that started from late March made it a lot harder to get people to go to indoor events. People were looking at, barbecues and all that malarkey. So we did have a few that drop by the wayside in spring. But that always happens. You get some that come, some that go, and we've got about half a dozen new ones that are launching this autumn. So it's always swings and roundabouts to an extent.
Okay, and sort of, well, to be honest, I think that's absolutely amazing, considering the fact that, I've been in the pub game since, well, not anymore, but since 2020, and pubs have just been falling out left, right, centre.
Yes.
Like,
Well, I think that in some ways can be beneficial to comedy because pubs need to find ways to fill their rooms throughout the week. They can't just rely on, Friday and Saturday nights.
yeah.
They need to, they've got ever higher fixed costs, and so they want to fill rooms. And comedy is a good way of filling your room on on an off night, like a Wednesday night or a Thursday night, when there's maybe not so much trade around. And comedy also can do very well for food as well. A lot of our venues, sell food before the show starts.
Hmm. Okay. And how do you sort of find the doing like your normal sets to transferring over to comparing your own nights?
Well, when I first started comparing, I started also going to an improv group,
Hmm.
and I found that that really helped because when I started out as now, I was very scripted and was always a bit thrown off my track if there was something that happened in the room. And so for about a year, I was going every week to an improv night, and that really helped the comparing and developing, being able to go off script. And after a while, it wasn't really, I didn't want to do sets, but as I started getting more and more clubs, then there wasn't really, I didn't really have time to do
Hmm.
sets elsewhere. I think that I remember the very time I decided it was time to stop gigging for other people. Agraman, a very long running promoter up in the northeast, who he'd booked me for a gig, and as he often did, he booked me like ages ahead, like 9 months ahead.
Yeah.
And by the time the gig came round, I'd got four of my own gigs running that were all nearer to
Yeah.
home, and I didn't want to pull a gig. So I ended up going and doing this gig, and thinking this is ridiculous. I've got four gigs that are my own clubs running nearer to home. So after that, I thought I better stop doing gigs elsewhere. Because also, once I got quite a number of clubs, it meant that I could stick to gigs that were within hours of home. And the one thing that a lot of people don't like in comedy, the one prime negative is the travel.
Yeah.
And you're quite often traveling 5 or 6 hours round trip to do a 20-minute set. And much as you love that 20-minute set, the drive is quite tedious.
100%. There's only so many podcasts and so like Les Mis album you could bang out over and over again until you sort of lose your sanity a little bit. Completely agree.
Yeah.
So, we what sort of nights do you sort of host in your venues? Is it sort of like a complete wide variety, or is it like do we just do open mic to pro bills,
Well,
competitions?
what I've always aimed to do and what I really like to do is have gigs at every level so that there's clear progression for any act to go from the very bottom to the very top. So we have, out of the 45 venues, we've got four that do gong shows.
Nice.
Um, no bringer gigs at all, ever.
We'll talk about them in a second. We will get very bitchy.
Right. Okay. So we've got four gigs that do gong shows, and we've got three venues where we have about sort of a lower level paid headliner, and then five or six 10-minute open spots. Which so basically the acts who do really well at the gong shows, who win or really impress at the gong shows,
Yeah.
they get an open 10 at one of those clubs. And then the acts who do impress on the open 10 spots will get a paid 10 at one of the bigger clubs. And then we have quite a number of gigs that maybe do a paid 15, that might be like 50 quid or something like
Yeah.
that. And then we have smaller clubs with lower level paid spots. And then we have the bigger ones that are, 150 capacity, where we have, the TV level acts doing. I have quite a few double up gigs where I've got two shows running within half an hour's drive of each other. So I can offer them two gigs. So all the sort of higher level acts, the sort of Paul Sinners and the, Scott Bennett's and those kind of level
Love Scott
acts,
Bennett.
I can get them.
Okay.
So
So it's almost like you're like an internal recruiter. Like once they're on your radar, you promote from within,
yeah, well, I
which is
did.
brilliant.
This was something in the early days of promoting. I didn't really have the level of progression. So I'd have people like James Acaster, for instance, did my gong show and he did several open tens for me.
Mm.
But I didn't really have anywhere. It was either that or then jump to full pro level. So I started developing, having a system of paid tens and paid 15s, etc. I mean, paid 15s didn't exist at all on the circuit when I started out.
Mm.
That was something I started doing because I wanted to, because it was such a big step from being when I started in sort of around about 2000, there was literally open 10 and then full pro.
Mm.
And there was no clubs really seemed to be offering paid 10s, paid 15s for you to step up from open 10 to pro. So that was something I developed, and it meant that I could keep the acts because I had it quite a few times that acts would, they do a good open 10, but I'd like, well, you've got a good open 10, but you're not pro level yet. And then they kind of slip off the radar. So now we've got the full level of progression.
Okay, and well, so I've got my first ever close on well tomorrow, my first ever 25-minute close, which I'm
Cool.
quite excited for. So with your gong shows, because I love gong shows. Like I think I'd always say to a comedian, look, it doesn't define your comedic capability. Sometimes it just doesn't work on the night, but it's also the room of gladiators.
Yes. Well, our gong shows are a lot more friendly than many others, particularly the Comedy Store,
That was my
which
first ever gig.
the Comedy Store is great entertainment as an audience member, but it's pretty horrific to perform. I did it twice, and no, actually, I did the Comedy Store one once and Beat the Frog one once. Gong shows didn't exist. I think those are the only two venues that did them, but I only survived 40 seconds the one time I did the Comedy Store one. I mean, it is a great skill to do it, but I certainly wouldn't discount any out that struggled in it. Because you have to. I mean, you can get gonged off for two after 2 seconds when you've done
Mm,
nothing sometimes there. So we give 2 minutes grace period.
yeah.
Um, the other thing we do on our gong shows is that I only allow people to be voted off at three different points: 2 minutes, 3.5 minutes, and 5 minutes. Because I think that takes a bit of pressure off. Because otherwise, people are just constantly nervous, thinking, "Oh, one wrong word and they can gong me off."
Yeah.
So I have the vote, and then they can take a deep breath. Right, they've got another 90 seconds of grace now. So you haven't got that constant thought of, oh, if I do one gag they don't like, then three, the red cards go straight up.
I do like that because I do think sometimes the third card can be a bit peer pressure
Yeah,
almost. But
yeah.
so with gong shows, I okay, I said I love gong shows, but I also am a believer that I think if someone does a gong show, they shouldn't be more than say sort of like 3 4 years in. I think it should be. It's
Um,
like just a little
yeah.
bit above an open mic, but like when you get like, you know, like semi pros coming down to bang out a gong show.
To be honest, that virtually never happens in my experience. Maybe if they've been off the circuit or they maybe need to warm up for something or whatever. But I mean, I'll obviously I want as good a show as possible. So if a higher level act wants to do it, then great. But to be honest, it's
100%.
a rarity.
And when you do a gong show, would you want every act to be good? It would last all night.
um, I know what you're getting at there. I mean, in theory, yeah, it would be great. But I mean, yeah, it can obviously add to the comedy if you get an absolute car crash as well. I mean, some of the most memorable moments are those kind of car crash acts where the whole audience is looking at themselves and going, "Did that really happen?"
Mm. I will ask on that in a second. Like I said my first ever gig I ever did was Comedy Store Gong Show in London. It lasted a minute 23. I was the second person on. Never done comedy before. Never even written a joke. Just went up there and just started waffling. The guy after me was giving me all this advice like how to do it, how to do it. He lasted 7 seconds because he was from New Zealand, and the second he opened his mouth, they were shouting like, "Get this fucking Kiwi off the stage,"
Well,
and
right,
that was
okay,
it.
well,
So,
yeah, I mean that's the thing about the comedy one. That's why you can't really judge anything
no.
off of that. You also get waves of energy at gong shows. Sometimes the audience are really kind of up for it and up for listening, and then they have a period where they're baying for blood. But that's not our gong shows. I'd never get them to do that at all. I try and give support. Obviously, I don't want an actor who's getting no laughs to be kept on.
Mm.
One thing I always do actually at the end of each section, I get the audience, or sorry, the start of each section of the second and third section, I get the audience to cheer or to vote on whether they think the judges have been too harsh or too
Oh,
lenient.
that's cool. I like that. I know some of them also they rotate the judges.
Right. No, I find that if particularly if I think the judge has been too harsh or too lenient, if I get the audience to vote on that, it resets the judges, and they then will think, okay, yeah, we've been too harsh. Because yeah, I don't want them to be too harsh and send good acts off, but I also don't want them to be too lenient. Because if you get a couple of acts who haven't really got any laughs, but the judges just keep them on, then it really can suck the energy out of the night. You need the balance to be right. You don't want good acts voted off, but you similarly don't want acts who are getting no laughs to get through.
Like one of my mates, he does a bit, and it's about basically he's 5'8", and the average height in this country is 5'9" or something, and he basically he opens his bit with, "Oh, I hate minorities," talking referring about short people, but they didn't give him the time of day to get to it, so they all just
Yes,
voted him off, called him a
really.
racist.
Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunate. Yeah, I know. I think I know the guy you mean. He's done an open spot for me this year,
Oh, he's
and
brilliant.
he was very good actually.
Yeah,
I've forgotten his name. You can remind me of that.
Josh, Josh and Taylor.
Josh. Yes, yeah, I think I saw him a few months ago. Yeah, he was good. Yeah, but that
He's a funny lad.
exactly. I mean, that's exactly the sort of thing that on the London Comedy Store, it will be funny to vote somebody off for that. I mean, actually, I had similar happen. Um, so some, I think somebody said something about now I want to talk about Muslims, but actually, that just as you said that, it was the 5 minutes, so I
Brilliant.
could put the cut-off music on, so he got through anyway. But it was yeah. Sometimes that was one of those comic timing things that was glorious.
Oh, I do love, and I think with one thing I'm really bad at is doing the timers. So I know, like in the blackout, up the creek, the blackout, they 2 minutes, the light goes on and off, and I've tried to time this joke that I've never done, like just go, baby, when the go out, and I just, but my timing is so awful, it would never actually be able to materialize. So, running these venues without, doing comparing all that for this long, how would you bring a room back? Let's say hypothetically, you brought me on, and I was the worst piece of shit in the world. I offended everybody. I pissed everyone. I sent you this video of me being Mother Teresa, and I was just Hitler on stage. I got booed off. How would you bring the room back as the compare?
Well, the first thing is you absolutely have to acknowledge it. And if the audience has really hated an act, you have to give them stick and acknowledge it. And so very much let the audience know you're on their side and you
Mm,
agree with them. So even if an act's bombed badly, although you might feel bad for the act, you've got to acknowledge it and maybe be a bit harsh on them
yeah.
because otherwise the audience don't really trust you. If you try and ignore the fact that an actor's died massively, you won't have the trust of the audience. So you've got to deal with that.
Okay, and in the point of comedy, okay, no, I also want to answer. So, say people send you a video of their on. Let's start off because I try and tailor this to people who've never done comedy before or sort of at entry level. So, you asked for a video unclipped, which I 100% agree with. I can't stand the social media where they do a 5 second video and it
No,
looks like they've killed it. Like,
no, absolutely not. And when they do a show reel and various clips of them getting laughs at different venues,
mm,
well, I want to see all the bits that you've chopped out here, which died,
yeah,
because you're not going to perform. You're not going to come to my gig and do a highlights reel. I want a solid 5 or 10 or whatever it is. So if anybody sends me a show reel, I'll just email back and say, look, I want an uncut
yeah.
vid of at least 5 minutes.
Well, I mean, yeah, I completely agree with that. And it sounds when you get like do more and more gigs, you don't really care about. Obviously, you always want to put on a good show, but if you do a joke that doesn't work, just acknowledge it. Just tell the crowd, oh, you didn't like that one, did you? Then
Yeah, although you can't keep doing that.
yeah, you can't have a solid 10 minutes of every
No,
one line of joke. Oh, you didn't like that one.
I've seen that done. You can probably get away with it once, but if you do it like more than a couple of times, the audience are like, no, you just shit, get off.
Okay, so say like I say, so say if I'm okay, was applying for a five, I send you a 5 minute video. Would you want me to do the material I've sent you, or is that
No,
just like a validation process?
no. Yeah, I can generally tell with most acts within a minute whether they're gong show, open spot, or pro level. I rarely watch vids for more than 1 minute because I nearly always know what level that act is. I probably usually would only watch it for more than that if it's borderline. But most of the time, particularly, within a minute, I normally know if they're a gong show level act or whether they can go straight into an open 10 or on rare occasions, straight into a paid work, but that they have to be like a really established pro to go straight into paid work.
Okay, and I know there's no like one size shoe fits all, but how many sort of gigs would you say is like the general rule of thumb process?
In what way?
So like, you go do an open mic for 25 gigs, then try a couple of gongs, then maybe after 50 gigs you start doing tens. Like I know there's no one size, but
No, there really isn't. it's really variable. I've seen some acts doing their first ever gig, and you think, oh wow, they could be the future of comedy, and
Mm.
you see them a year later, and they haven't improved at all. I've seen acts be ropey, really ropey on their first gigs, and you've seen them a while later, and they're suddenly like, oh my God, you're really good now. Um, so the speed at which people progress can vary massively. There are some people who are just really good from the off. Josh Pugh did his first ever gig at my Gong show in Burton on
Cool.
Trent, and he won it, and he was really good on his first gig. Um, and there are other acts who, they're not particularly good when they start out, and it takes them quite a while to find their voice. They maybe start out as one sort of act, and then, find that something else works for them. Might start out as a one-liner act, and then decide that conversational act is more for them. So I would never have that kind of linear. Sometimes I see on forums things like people say, "Oh, act must have done at least 100 gigs," and I
Mm.
think, well, I've seen acts who've done 1,000 gigs who are terrible. I've
Yeah.
seen acts who've done 10 gigs who I've given paid work to. So the number of gigs doesn't really mean anything.
Okay. And I've seen quite a lot recently on sort of the forums and stuff. People like actively asking for sort of people of different communities for their sort of bills. What's the reasoning, would you say, behind that, or just to have a more diverse bill?
Well, it's absolutely every promoter I speak to wants to have greater diversity. I mean, the big one of all is more women.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the problem is that despite the fact that I mean there are more women doing it than when I started,
Mm.
but I wouldn't say massively more women. I mean, you can see at gong show level because that's when the first time people approach you, and that's open to anybody. So there's no kind of selection involved from the promoter.
Mm.
Um, I mean, when I started doing gong shows probably 15 years ago, it did happen quite often that there were no women on the bill at all. Now I would say it's actually virtually every gong show does have probably a couple of women on the bill. So we've probably moved from maybe, I don't know, 5 to 7% women starting out in comedy, and we're maybe up to possibly 15% now. But it is still a very difficult thing because you look at the number of pro acts, it's still a lot lower, and all promoters would like. It's far more interesting. I mean, my favorite bills are the ones that have great variety. The more
Mm.
variety there is, the better. Not just in terms of women and ethnic minorities or different nationalities, but also in terms of style. I like whenever I can to have one act on the bill that isn't straight stand up. So I'll try
Okay.
and have maybe a comedy magician or a character act or a musical act. So it's not just all acts doing the straight stand up. So the more variety there is, the better. But on the other hand, you don't want to just have tokenism for the sake of it. If the acts are not up to the level, you're not doing them any favors. Because if you're only advertising a slot to women, for instance, and then you're booking a female act that's not the level of the rest of the bill, then you get audience saying, "Oh, women comics are rubbish,"
Mm.
and
Yeah.
that's not doing anybody any favors. Good female acts, so many promoters want good female acts that
Mm.
they're never going to have a problem getting slots on bills. Every promoter I speak to wants more diversity on the bills, but it is, there are obviously issues with female acts that we've unfortunately heard a lot about. You're traveling late at night, car shares. It's not. It's a difficult thing, particularly if you don't drive and you're trying to get lifts off people, and you don't know who you're getting lifts with, which can obviously make it unappealing. Also, if you do drive, you're driving late at night and going to service stations at 1 in the morning and stuff,
Mm.
which is not so appealing to women on their own. Quite often, it's we all want more diversity, and the progress has been made, but not probably to the level that a lot of people want it to be made.
100 agree. Even from the start of doing this pod, the amount of stories that I've heard from women and some of like the shocking things they've had to endure. One of them, she was a lovely girl, very attractive. she can't promote her nights on her own Instagram because she has stalkers. And it's basically, oh, so you're going to be there on the 8th of September? Oh, lovely.
Mm,
And like, you're so,
yeah.
I'm not saying I wasn't aware. I was. It's something that you just don't even consider when you're not a weirdo. So,
Mm,
having to actually see that was
yeah.
quite shocking. So do you think in with modern society now you can joke about anything?
Um, Pretty well, but you've got to be very skillful at it, I would say, and you've got to read the room.
Mm.
The material you can do, if even if you're the same act, if you're opening a gig, it's a different dynamic in a room compared to closing a gig. That's people will laugh at much more when they've had a couple of beers inside them than they will at the start of the night.
Mm.
And it depends on the kind of audience you're in front of. If you're at a sort of more theatery gig compared to a late night weekend club, different subject matters will work better. Day of the week as well. People drink less midweek. If you're doing a gig on a Tuesday night, it's different to doing a weekend gig. You've got to read that room, and if you are doing, risque material about tricky subject matters, get good at comedy first, because there is absolutely nothing worse than a ropey open spot doing material about rape, dead
Yeah,
babies, you know,
100,
bombs,
100
blah de
agree.
blah.
Yeah, I don't do risque material just because I don't think I can do it justice yet. Like I said,
Mm.
I've got, but when I think of like, say if I thought of like a black joke, a Muslim joke, whatever, I would send it to my black mate. I'd send it to my Muslim mate who are comedians, and have a look, see if you could do something with this because I'm aware of the persona I'm giving off on stage.
Yeah, it's interesting. Gary Delaney, when he started out, he did quite fluffy one-liners. There was nothing offensive in his material at all. He didn't start doing darker stuff until he was actually a really good joke writer, and that's probably quite a good thing to do, because if until you've really got the skills to write good jokes,
Mm.
because you've got the if you do a risque joke, it can absolutely smash a gig if it's a good joke and you've got the right audience. But if you do that badly, you can absolutely kill a room. And it's get good at writing the jokes, and make sure if you're doing a risque joke that it genuinely is a good joke.
Mm.
And you can get away with all sorts, but also it's the room. I gather I remember speaking to a manager at Glee a couple of years ago, the Glee Club in Nottingham, and he told me that the most of the complaints they get about subject matter are from young people.
Yeah, I can imagine. I truly could imagine that. I mean, I do one joke, Muslim joke. It's not offensive at all. It goes along the lines of Sharia law. You can't be caught with a girl behind closed doors. Otherwise you get arrested or you got to marry them. So I always fucked her with the door open.
Right.
Like
Okay.
nice simple play on.
Hmm.
But I where before I tell that joke now in advance, I always say one second. I need to quickly gauge the room. Yeah, I'm not looking for any Muslims. I'm looking for women in their 30s ready to be offended on their behalf. So then,
Well, another problem you get when you do risque material is, if you do a joke about, race or whatever,
mm,
someone who it maybe isn't that intelligent, doesn't quite get the joke,
yeah,
they can find offense in it because of the fact they weren't clever enough to properly understand it,
yeah.
and that can make it tricky for an act.
Oh, 100. Like I had someone who was annoyed at me for my gay bit. Now I'm as flamboyant as they come, and my gay bit has the perfect closed open start. Is anyone here gay? Yes. Oh, thanks for coming out. So easy, so simple,
Yeah.
and then it just goes on the pretense that women, when man and women get married, women's workload increases by 6 hours, men's decreases. So men have got more time in the day. That's why gay people always look fantastic. Da da da. If I sucked enough
Mhm.
cock, I might be able to get myself a girlfriend. But
Right. Yeah.
I'm feeling it. But the second as I mentioned
Mhm.
gay, I gay people get annoyed at that. But then I think they looked at me and they didn't. All they then was saw red. They weren't able to actually filter the fact that it wasn't actually insulting them. It was complimenting them.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, people aren't listening properly, especially if they've
Mm.
had a few drinks. They might not understand the full meaning of the joke, and they can take offense just by hearing a word.
Okay, so okay, I will. I've got two more quickly then for you. Bringers. What is your thoughts on them?
I think they are terrible idea.
Hmm.
London, what the hell are you doing? Sort it out. Nowhere else is doing this in the whole country. We're all laughing at you. Just, just not at your bringer gigs. I know some people think they're all right and they give a supportive audience, but they're an audience that's there as hostages, basically.
Yeah.
They're not wanting to be there. They're going there. I mean, at your first gig, yeah, you might want to bring one or two people along, but once you've done a few gigs, no one wants to come along. People only want to see you when you first start out.
Yeah, you
Um,
mates don't really give a
but
shit.
even then, you want a decent gig because the problem is, if every act on the bill is brand new, it's going to be a terrible night of comedy because
Mm,
no, hardly any act is really good when they first start.
mm,
So even if I have a gong show on, yeah, there might be a couple of acts doing their first or second gigs, but we will have gigs at the gong shows who acts who are the gong shows who've done 50 or 100 gigs and are really good acts laying it out. But
mm.
if you've got 15 acts all doing 5 minutes and they are all on like their first or second gig, you'll be lucky if more than two of them are actually any good. So you're going to have a painful night which no one will want to return to. And that's why it kind of perpetually will stay a bringer because
Mm.
you're never going to develop a regular audience because it's not a good night of entertainment.
And also, I think it's a false representation of your actual abilities.
Um, I don't know about that, but I mean, the thing is, when you're starting out, it's better if you're on the bill. If you have an act who's brand new, I mean, for me, I like having the gong shows because if an act is really bad and they're gonna, kill the room,
Yeah.
at least you can gong them off after 2 minutes, and that's not killed a night. But if you're putting on several acts for 5 or 10 minutes and you've got three or four acts in a row that aren't funny,
Mm.
absolutely, you've sucked the life out of the room.
Yeah. When I just what I saw about the false representation with a lot of them in London, there'll be them and their mates all like sitting around performing to one another, then circle
Mhm.
jerking each other, telling each other how great they are.
The other thing about bringers is you're actually damaging people's perception of comedy. If you bring your friend along and that's the first time they've been to stand-up comedy
Mm.
and they think that's what stand-up comedy is, they're never going to come back to a decent show. There's a lot of people who you will have put off comedy because they're terrible nights and all the audience are there purely under duress because their mate has coerced them into it.
Completely. Okay, I'll end it with this one. Um, what's okay? Okay, no, scrap that. I'm gonna end it on this one. Then the one I usually like to end it on because a man who does 45 venues. What advice would you give to a new comedian for the first time who's thinking about doing it but is not quite sure?
Um, Well, for one, I would say don't just think that, people say, "Oh, I'm not funny," and you think you can, and people say, "Oh, you can't learn it." Well, you can learn it. I've met lots of people off stage who are not funny at all, but they've written a set that will work on stage. And the other thing I would say is don't if your first gig or first or second gig don't go well, don't just think, oh, I'm not funny. It's not
Mm.
going to work. There are plenty of acts who've gone on to be pros who've started off badly. If you want it, if you feel it's something you want to do and you've got hunger for it, keep pushing, keep writing, keep gigging, and give yourself a proper chance at it. It's hard to get good gigs, and when you've it's much easier when you've got a good MC, builds it up, gets the audience on side, gets energy in the room. It makes it a lot easier to have a good gig. If you're doing an open mic or a bringer with an open spot compare who can't generate much in a room, even if you're quite a good act, it may not feel like you are when you're on the stage. So give it some time. If you feel like you've got that thing within you, that drive, and you think I want to do this, don't just give up after one or two gigs. Push it, keep writing, and go for it.
Love that. I mean, yeah, that was absolutely brilliant. Joe, so many people say just do it. I love when they give tangible advice. So brilliant. Look, Mike, thank you ever so much for coming on. I know we're time sensitive, but I could end up talking to you for hours. Yeah, brilliant. Really appreciate this, dude.
Nice one. Enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
Thank
All the
you.
best. I'll maybe see you on the circuit sometime.
Thank you ever so much for watching, guys. Cheers.
Cheers.